We're going to take a look at some layering, selecting, and masking techniques in PIXLR today with a focus on using texture and color. So let's get started. I'm going to start by opening an image. Over here on the left-hand side, there's, like when you first bring up PIXLR.com, like I'm using PIXLR E, which is a little more advanced than the PIXLR X option. So I'm going to click on the button to open my image, and I've got a texture file here that I'm going to open up. On the left side, we've got the toolbox. At the top, we've got the options for those tools. On the right hand side, we've got layers panel, a way to navigate, and there's a history panel over here as well. Mostly you're going to be working in this layers panel, so if you need to make yourself some more room, you can kind of minimize the other two. We're going to bring in another texture file and add it to our layers stack here. So you're going to notice at the bottom of the layers panel there's a plus button. That's the quickest way to add a new layer, and you can choose to add an empty layer, or one with an image, or one with text. We're going to add an image. There it is. And you're going to see, unless you give them money, that you're going to have this pop-up ad every once in a while. You'll have to close it. It's kind of annoying. And hey, maybe you want to support them and throw a little money their way. It's not a bad program to have at your disposal, but you can use it for free. Now I've got my white paint over the top of my orange paint. If you want to hide a layer, there's a check mark for visibility on the side of it there. And you can see I've got two layers now. The white paint layer is on top of the background. And one thing that I want to point out to you guys is that this file is larger than the background. The white paint is a larger file. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. In fact, if you hold down the Command key and hit the minus key on the keyboard, or Control minus on a PC, you can zoom out. And when I zoom out here, I can see the bounding box for the white paint image. And I can tell that it's larger, so I can grab, say, the corner here, and I can reduce the size of this thing. Right? So you can size things up and down if you have the Arrange tool selected, right? This is the Move tool in Photoshop. Here in PIXLR, it's called the Arrange tool, and it's how you transform things and move things around. So I just reduced the size of that. Now I'm going to zoom back in to see the entire image kind of fit to the screen, the interface. So I can hit the Command button and tap the 0 key on the keyboard, not O, but 0. There we go. It zooms to fit the image on your screen within the interface. Now I've got my two textures here. I want the darker cracks of this top layer to remain visible and the lighter pixels on this layer to become transparent so I can see the orange layer through it. So I'm going to come over here to the layers panel. Each layer has a layer setting option, and I'm going to click on that, like the three dots there. Those are my options for that layer. And here I can, change the name of the layer if I want, change the blending mode, which is what we're going to do, or modify the transparency, right? I can lower the transparency here. I can lock a layer. I can toggle visibility. I can merge things down or duplicate a layer here or throw it in the trash. What we're doing this time is changing the blending mode. Blending modes are just fancy ways to control the transparency of a layer so you can see through it in certain ways. In this case, I want the darker pixels to remain, the lighter pixels to be blended away, so I'm going to choose the multiply mode. Multiply allows darker pixels to be visible, enhanced, and then those lighter pixels will blend away, become transparent. So I get the best of both textures here. Pretty cool. We're going to add another layer here. So down here, again, at the bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to click the plus button, add another image layer. once again, I'm going to hit Command and the minus key on the keyboard to zoom out a couple of times. Once again, I'm going to grab the corners, reduce the size a bit. You can click in the center to reposition it. Once you've got it about the size you want it, and I'm trying to concentrate on rule of thirds, I'm going to place it in the lower right third. Now I can zoom back in. So Command 0 is the quick way to do that. Now, I'm going to add a mask to this. There's a tool over here in the toolbox that looks like a pair of scissors. See that? That is the cutout / mask tool, right? And this allows you to mask off areas to make them transparent where you want them to be and visible in other places. I'm going to come up here to the options for that tool. And you can see there are several modes with which you can operate this tool. Like you can do it with a shape, like I can literally click and drag an area and it will confine that mask to that shape, right? And in fact, there's a mode here to add to the mask or subtract. If I click on or remove, if I remove from the mask, you'll see that it's got a red outline. That means it's going to be removing that part. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And add to mask. When you use it, it'll be green and it'll keep that part. There's also a magic mask option that uses the magic wand, the draw mask function, which is what we're going to use this time. You can also lasso a mask, right, to remove or keep. Play around with those. There's also the gradient mask where you can click and drag a gradient through an image to get that gradual fade, which is a really nice kind of cinematic effect. But we're going to use the draw mask option. It looks like a paintbrush. And over here to the right, you can change the size of your brush. I've got a pretty big brush. It starts pretty small, but I've bumped it up to about 400 pixels. I've increased the softness quite a bit to about 60%, so it'd be a nice soft edge. And the step option basically is how smooth that line is going to be as you drag your brush across it. The default is 20, which is about right. I'm going to set the opacity for this brush to 50%. Like if it's at 100%, you'll see that it removes things pretty quickly, right? It does have a soft edge because I chose to make that brush soft, right? If my brush were not soft, right, it would not be a smooth transition at all along that edge. It'd be really sharp, which can be what you want sometimes. When you're trying to perfect a mask, you might want a harder edge. In this case, I want a soft blend so that this image kind of just blends into my background nice and easy. So once again, I'm going to set my brush softness up quite a bit. If I lower the opacity, it gives me a little bit more control over how quickly this transition happens, right? So if I go over an area, it doesn't automatically disappear like it would at 100%. At 50%, I've got some control. I can go over it a couple of times and really manage how quickly that transparency takes place. And once again, I'm using the remove from mask mode. I'm removing the area that I'm brushing. That's looking pretty good. But I want the cracks from the texture underneath to show through this. So I'm going to look for a blending mode that will allow that to happen. So like if you're not sure what these do, you can like cycle through them and just kind of look for the one that gives you the effect that you're after. That one's not bad. It allows that blue to show through. In fact, that's really what I'm after here. I want something that allows that blue color to show through because I'm working on a complementary color scheme, orange and blue. Hey, difference mode isn't bad. It lets a lot of blue show through. It's a little flashy. I'm thinking maybe hard light. That allows some of that blue to show through. Not bad. I'm going to engineer a little bit of negative space in this composition. Texture, when you're using a lot of texture, it can really overwhelm the eye, so I'm going to engineer a little bit of negative space. And this time, I'm just going to open a file, right? I want to work on it independently. Instead of adding it as a layer instantly, I'm just going to open a file up. So I just want this white part up here. And I don't necessarily want the texture of the cardboard. I just want this kind of jagged edge and that white space. So I'm going to, again, manufacture some negative space for my image. So over here in the toolbox, I'm going to get the wand select tool, which is like the magic wand if you're familiar with Photoshop. I'm going to click on that white area, and you'll see that the wand selects similar pixels, similar colored pixels, similar values. So here's my selection. If I were to select, click on another part of the image, it's going to select similar colored pixels. But since this is an uninterrupted white space, it just selects the whole thing. So I'm going to copy that, Command C or Control C on a PC, and I'm going to come back over here to my original file. You see that there are tabs for your files up here if you open more than one file. All right, I'm going to hit Command V to paste that in. All right, and so now it comes in on its own layer. In fact, I want to transform this. So when I have the Arrange tool selected, I can choose a fixed transformation where it keeps the proportions even, or I can choose a free transformation where I can really warp it. Now, I don't recommend this on something that's not as abstract, but a simple white background with a torn edge is abstract enough where we're not worried about proportions. By the way, instead of switching to the free transformation, you can just leave it on fixed and temporarily hold down the Shift key and see it toggles that free option. That looks better. It gives me a little bit of negative space for my eye so it's not as overwhelmed. Trust me, you really want to engineer some negative space in an image that has a lot of texture like this. The next image we're going to open up is a target. And this time I'm just, again, going to click on the plus sign at the bottom of the Layers panel. This time, I want what's black to become white and white to become black. Up here in the Adjustment menu, I can choose to invert. There we go. I could try to change the blending mode here and find something that would, allow the white pixels to remain and the dark pixels to fade away. And that's cool. However, the cracks don't show through if I'm in screen mode. And like some of these other modes that allow the cracks to show through aren't coming through the way that I want. And after a while, you'll come to figure out when will this work and when will it not. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just going to put this back on none for now. Rotate it a bit. I'm going to mask this one also. So I'm going to go to the Cutout Mask tool here. Once again, I'm going to use the Magic Mask option. If I come over to the black areas that I want to hide, I can click. You can see that it'll start to remove those. Now, if I don't want to have to do that all day long, like for instance, I would have to get in here and do that for each of these black numbers. What I can do is on the options at the top here, I can turn off the contiguous option. Contiguous means that if you click on something to select it, it selects only things within that range and it doesn't jump across boundaries. So we've got these white lines that are keeping it from selecting more. So if I take contiguous off, I'll be able to click on one of these black areas and it will select all of the other black areas because it's not confined within those boundaries now. It's not contiguous. I'm going to turn contiguous back on because I have a feeling that I'm going to need to. There are other options for the magic wand up here, like the tolerance. Like the higher the number, the more pixels it will select. The lower the number, the less it will select. And then feathering is the edge of that selection. I've got it on a very low feather selection right now, but it's usually a good idea to leave it at 0 and just to increase that feather as you need it. Now, I can go back and choose a blending mode, like overlay. Now the cracks are coming through and I can still see my target. Next, we're going to bring in some skeletal hands because, you know, my content calls for that, right? This is about war and peace, right? So we've got to have some death imagery, of course. All right, I'm going to click on the Add Layer button, make it an image layer. Open that up. There we go. Now, once again, I'm going to mask this. So I'm going to get the mask tool again. Select the magic mask one more time. And again, this time, I think I want these edges to be kind of soft around the fingers instead of a real hard edge. So I'll bump that feather up a little bit to smooth things out a touch. And now I'm going to click on that black background, and it selects similar pixels. So it gets a lot of that black background. Not all of it, but most of it. And if you were really wanting to remove everything, you know, that wasn't the bones, you could come in here and start clicking more. But I actually want that transition, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to leave that in place. So now I'm going to look for a blending mode that'll allow this to really composite into that texture. Maybe color dodge. Yeah, that's a little blown out, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the Arrange tool again, right? My Move tool. Remember, this little round doohickey will rotate. Now, I'm going to duplicate this layer. If you go to the options for that layer, you have the duplicate layer option right there. But I want to point out to you guys, I'm going to undo that. You can also right click on that object and choose duplicate layer. It's a little quicker. All right, now I want to flip this up here on the options panel up here. I can rotate things, right? Or I can flip them. I can flip them horizontally or vertically. This time I want to do it horizontally, like so. I'm going to open up another file. This time I want a bug. And I'm opening this one up separately because I want to deal with it separately. First of all, I want my color to be consistent with my color scheme that I'm planning. So green doesn't really fit in with that. So I'm going to go up to the adjustment menu here. First thing I'm going to do is maybe adjust the values in the image. Say I want to darken the darks and brighten the highlights a bit. I can do that with curves. Curves, basically the darks are down here in the lower left and the brights are in the upper right. If you double click on this diagonal line, it sets a point. And you can then click and drag that point. So down here in the darks, I'm making the darks darker by dragging it down. I can double click up here to add a point in the highlights and drag that up. That creates an S curve. That really sharpens things and increases contrast. It's a nice thing to do, especially on those objects that you really want to stand out. All right, and now I'm going to go back to the adjustment options here and choose Hue Saturation. Hue means color, and I can click and drag that hue slider to change the colors. So I'm going to settle on something that's more bluish. Now, you can also adjust saturation here. So if it's too saturated, you can lower the saturation or increase it if it's not enough. Lightness I would leave alone. I would adjust lightness with curves rather than with that slider. All right, now I've got a blue bug. I'm going to get the wand select tool, click on that white background. Now, I don't want the white background, I want the bug. I selected the white background because it's a lot easier. If I'm trying to select this thing by clicking on the bug, I'll be here all day long. But because the white background is so simple, I can select it, then go to the select menu and choose invert selection. Shortcut is Control I or Command I. Now it's selected the opposite. Now the bug is selected. So Command C to copy, back to my image, Command V to paste. Hit the V key to get the Arrange tool. And I'm going to make a couple of copies of him. Remember, right click, duplicate layer. Here's my copy. Once again, let's make another one. Right click, duplicate layer. Now on this guy, because he's overlapping that background and his wings are still white, that's going to bother me. So I'm going to zoom in. Command and the plus key will zoom in several times. If you hold the space bar down, you can move yourself over, right? That allows you to pan. Now, let's use our cutout mask again with the magic mask option. I'm going to set the tolerance for 32. I'm going to bump the feather up a little bit because I don't want the edge to be too jagged. See, if I set the feather to 0 and remove from the mask, you can see that the edge is kind of jagged here. So I want that to be smoother. I'm going to undo that. Bump that feather up just a little bit and try again. Now you can see that that edge is softer. So controlling the feather is important. So I'm just going to click on these white areas where the wing is supposed to be transparent. I might speed that up so you guys don't have to watch that, but that's all I'm doing is clicking in these white areas on the wings to make them transparent in this mask. It's always a good idea to zoom in if you're doing detailed work that requires some precision. Now, I'm going to zoom back out. That looks good. One last thing, we're going to take a look at using the lasso to select something. I'm going to open up another image. I want the lock in this image in the chain, but I don't want the background. If you've got a background that's getting in the way, say if I wanted to use the wand to select this thing, if I click on it, it instantly starts to get things that I don't want. And again, I could try to set the tolerance a little lower to see, if I could mitigate that, but it's really tough sometimes when the background is similar colors to what you're trying to select. So using the magic wand isn't an option. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect that. I'm going to switch to the lasso tool. And if you just use the free lasso tool, it's kind of difficult. Like you have to add as much as you can and then hold down the shift key to add more to it, whatever you missed. And it can be pretty tricky. So I'm going to hit Command D again to deselect that. But there are different options here. Like here's the polygon lasso. That allows me to click from point to point to point, like this rectangular part that makes up the majority of the lock. I just clicked from point to point. And when I got back to the original, it enclosed that selection. So that's one way to go about it. You could use the polygon lasso and just click point to point and get as close as you can. But when you're dealing with curves like this, it's pretty time consuming to use the polygon lasso. So I'm going to show you the magnetic lasso option. This allows you to, and by the way, I'm going to turn on the Add to Select option, right? You can hold the Shift key down instead, but that's what's going on up there. So if you have the new selection option and you hold down Shift, you'll see that it'll toggle the Add to area. And if I hold down Control or the Windows key, it'll subtract. So you can add and subtract pretty easily. I'm just going to turn on the Add so I don't have to worry about it for now. And I'm going to click. And this allows you to kind of take your time and go around the thing you're wanting to select. I'm not worrying about the interior of the chain right now, just the outer edge. I'm not too worried if it's not absolutely perfect right now. I can go back and modify this and add to areas that I missed and subtract some areas that I want to remove. So I'm just going through pretty quickly here. If this were you doing this, you'd be taking your time. Now, when I get back to where I started, I'm going to double click, and that adds that to the selection, right? And so this part up here I missed, so I'm going to click and go around it, double click to add that. Now I'm going to subtract some of these voids in here, so I'm going to switch to that subtract from selection option. And again, if this is you, you'd be taking your time and really like zooming in and doing a good job. I'm just going pretty quickly here. Double click when you're back to the original point where you want to set the selection. Double click. In any place where you want to add it back in, I'm holding Shift down now to add back in. All right, so the selection looks pretty good. I'm going to hit Command C to copy that. Go back to my original, Command V to paste. There's my lock. Hit the V key to get that Arrange tool. And once again, let's find just the right blending mode to make this feel at home. Like I could try difference because that gives me more blue. And so if I thought in my color scheme I needed more blue, maybe that's the answer. Or if I decide, I don't want that lock to be so prominent, I could try something else, like maybe overlay. Yeah, it's much less noticeable in overlay mode, but it's just kind of a hint of it there. So striking a balance, choosing the right blending modes, masking things, try your hand at it. It's going to take some practice and there's going to be some trial and error, but you can do this. Now, when you're done with this project, you can go to the File menu and choose Save. And you can save this thing as a JPEG, a PNG, a PXD, which is their proprietary file type. But like choose your quality for a JPEG, for instance. You can set the size here. When you're working on the project for your own purposes, you can set this resolution pretty high. I recommend at least 1500 by 1200 for your image size in terms of pixels, which will make a decent, say, 8 by 10 print if you wanted to print the thing. Now, when you turn it in online, it's going to need to be smaller than that. So read the instructions, make sure that you're following them. But you can reduce the size here if you needed to. But anyway, choose JPEG, set it pretty high quality, hit download, and it will download to your downloads folder on your computer. So go find it, and you've got a file that you can turn in when the project is due. All right, good luck to you.